Okay, so second type of factorizing we're going to look at is called grouping. Grouping is used to factorize an expression which has four terms. Okay, so that's going to be our key point as to how we know we have to use grouping. We see four terms, and the four terms have no common factor across all four. If we have four terms that all had a common factor, we could use our highest common factor method. But here we'll have four terms and they have no common factor across all four of them. And our goal, as before, is to write it in terms of its factors, whereas in this case, we're going to end up with two expressions. So where in the highest common factor method we were getting things like maybe 2x times x plus 7, which is one term and one expression, here we're going to be ending up with two expressions. Okay, so the steps for this one, and they're kind of they seem a little bit longer, but we're really following the same steps obviously with any question for grouping, and really you're repeating your steps a few times here. The first step is we take the expression in two parts, grouping them into pairs with common factors. And what I'll say with that is in some cases that's going to mean changing the order, and we'll look at one of those examples here later as well. So once we've split it into two parts, we look for the highest common factor of the first pair, and we're going to factorize. So this is why I said you need to know your highest common factor before you look at this one. Same thing goes with the second, then we do the highest common factor of the second pair. We then need to make sure that the two brackets that we've come up with, so think back at how we've done our highest common factor there from before, we end up with brackets, those two brackets should match. And if they don't, then we may need to change something like the signs. We then write it as two brackets and check by expanding. Okay, we can check by multiplying out. So let's have a quick look at some of these examples here then, bearing in mind our steps. So the first step and the main thing with grouping, we should have four terms and we take them in two parts. So for example, I'm going to take these first two terms together and then going to take these second two terms together. And notice that I'm including that kind of plus sign with the 3aq there, because that's going to be important for later as well. So let's just look at the red part on its own first of all. If we even just take it to the side here, in practice I suppose we might do all of this in one go, but let's just take it to the side. So looking for PA minus PB, I'm doing highest common factor. I'm looking for the largest thing that they have in common that would divide into both of them, and that's just going to be P. And it's going to leave me with A minus B. Okay, taking the green part here, then it's plus 3AQ minus 3BQ. Again, looking for the largest thing that they both have in common that would divide into both of them, we can see that it's definitely 3 and it's also Q, because Q divides into both of them and leaves me with A plus B, or A minus B, sorry. The other part I said we had to include, I suppose, and what we should include here is that we've taken out a positive 3q. We haven't factored out a negative pq because we're going to see how that, or 3q, because we're going to see how that's going to change things in a second there. So we're keeping that plus between them. Okay, so this is kind of where we're at now, is this part here. So we've gotten to P times A minus B plus 3Q times A minus B. And our third step, or our fourth step there, said to check the two brackets match. And we can see here that they do. We have A minus B in both cases. Now what we could think about with this is this idea of the A minus B being itself a common factor now. So we could take that out from both cases. But the idea, the general thing that we're doing then is bringing these two parts together into one bracket. So we end up with P plus 3Q, and in our second bracket we get that one that we had that matched for both of them. So really what we're doing is we're factoring out that A minus B bracket, and we're then adding the two that are left in the same way that we did it from before. Okay, but if you want to think of it as just bringing the P and the 3Q together and leaving the other bracket the same as well. If we want to check that, then we just multiply out our brackets. So the first step will bring me back now to the second line that I had, and we should remember how to multiply that out from our algebra. PA minus PB plus 3QA minus 3QB, which gives me the same answer there, with maybe some of the letters swapped around, but that's not going to change the order of the question or the value of the question at all. If we look now at another example for grouping, okay, and in this example with grouping we may need, I'm kind of highlighting a possible change that could happen, and it's where we may need to change the order to ensure common factors in each pair. So looking at this example, we have Sx minus 2ty plus tx minus 2sy. So I can see by looking at it straight away that I have nothing in common with, for example, these first two, sx and minus 2ty. Those two terms have nothing in common with each other. The same thing goes then with my second case here. These two terms also have nothing in common with each other. Now, it is important to note that in some cases we may just be taking out a factor of 1. But in this example, if I took out a factor of 1, I still wouldn't end up with brackets that matched with each other. So in this case, the best thing we could do is rearrange the question so that we have terms that have things in common beside each other. So just from looking at the question there, I can see that sx and 2sy have more in common because they have that s in common. Okay, because I can see straight away that they have that little bit more in common. So I'm going to swap these terms so that I can have them in the order that I would prefer. So we can see here I've swapped the 2sy and the 2ty with each other. Now that I've done that, I can look at each term individually, or each pair individually as before. So get the highest common factor there for sx and minus 2sy. That's just going to be s. It leaves you with x minus 2y. Doing the same then for the second bracket here, the tx minus 2ty. Again, the highest common factor here is just a t, a plus t. And I'm going to be left with x minus 2y. And lastly now, I just put those together into a nice bracket for myself, keeping this bracket the same, and we've happy enough that we've checked that these two do match. And I get s plus t times x minus 2y as my two factors there. So making sure that we always end up with our two brackets and kind of being consistent with our signs, working our way down as well. We can check our answer by just multiplying out. So s times x minus 2y plus t times x minus 2y, and we end up with our original equation there, our original expression, I suppose I should say. So the same idea again, we've swapped our order, and the thing with swapping the order is you can always do that. You can always swap the order if you think there are factors or terms there that you could get factors out of easier, then you can swap the order to suit yourself. Okay, you're always free to do that. The last little part to look at here then is if the signs inside the brackets do not match. And the key part with this is this idea here. If we have a situation like this where we have plus 3 on the outside and minus x plus 6 on the inside, if I wanted to change the signs of what I have on the inside there, I might change the sign of what I have on the outside, because it's like me factoring out a minus 1, dividing each term by a minus 1. And we know that dividing anything by a minus 1 would change the sign. So the minus x would become a plus and the plus 6 would become a minus. So we're going to see the same thing happen here. If I look first of all at 3ax minus bx, I can see that the highest common factor there would be x, and it leaves me with 3a minus b. If I look at the second one and say I'm kind of disregarding that sign for a second, or I'm not sure if I want to use it, I might say that y is the common there, and I could take out a plus y and I get minus 3a plus b. And I can see from looking there straight away that my two brackets do not match with each other. Okay, so these do not match. And the only difference is the signs. Okay, in one it's a minus and the other it's a plus, and the same goes for each term. So what I need to change there in order to get those to match is actually the sign on the outside. I need to divide or factor out a minus y, because doing that means that minus 3ay divided by minus y is going to leave me with a positive 3a, because a negative divided by a negative gives me a positive. And the same thing goes with the minus b there. And then I can again recombine those as before into my two brackets. I will say again, with your factorizing there, the important thing is just to stay consistent and to get some practice. Again, there's loads of questions there. There are situations where we need to swap the order. There are situations like that last one where you need to factor out a negative number. A lot of the time that's going to be the case for questions such as this one, where the negative is between those first pair and second pair. A lot of the time that's where you'll end up with those particular situations there. But loads of questions for you to practice. And the last key thing with grouping to be kind of sure that you're remembering is just when and how we recognize it. So we use it when we have 4 terms which have no common factor across all 4. So once you can recognize it and once you can do the steps then in following your grouping, then you're sorted.